Always true.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world for
Is that going to be?
More than a year ago, at the height of the Italian fiscal crisis, Italian Prime Minister Berlusconi was forced to resign. When Mario Monti was appointed to succeed him, there was a collective sigh of relief. Italians marking the end of an era. He'd never run for office. Instead, he was appointed by the president and the parliament, an outsider to local politics with a solid background in the European Union halls of power. A man many thought was their only hope out of the mess. His reform program has helped steer Italy back from the brink, but it's been a difficult period. Although not as violent as those in Greece, angry demonstrations have taken place in the streets. Austerity measures have hit hard. Many people have lost their jobs. Some businessmen have even taken their own lives. But Italy has managed to avoid a financial bailout, and interest rates seem to have stabilized. Plus, European leaders appear heading towards banking union, which may channel aid directly to Eurozone banks and relieve governments from carrying that aid in their financial books. Sounds good? Well, it's not a done deal yet. German voters, among others, are less than happy to make yet more rescue cash available for other economies. So will all the grand plans come together in time to maintain confidence in countries like Italy? And will Monti's reforms continue after March elections? He recently travelled to the Middle East in search of investments and support. Today on Talk to Al Jazeera, the man who's running the project to save Italy. It's Prime Minister Mario Monti. Prime Minister of Italy, Mario Monti, thanks so much for talking to Al Jazeera.
It's a pleasure.
You're here in the region. What is your message to investors in this part of the world?
My message is look at the Eurozone. It has vastly stabilized itself. Look at Italy. Italy has put to a very large extent its own house in order, including most recently the adoption of a bold anti-corruption law, which was not there so far, and a series of structural reforms which I'm sure will make in the very near future Italy as one of the places in Europe from which most benefits can be derived in terms of financial or direct investments. So this is part of my message visiting the Gulf countries.
A message also perhaps seeking investment in Italy?
Well, that is obviously, that is more than a message. That is one of the key purposes of my visit here.
You've been in office for a year now. International confidence in Italy has improved, but the economy is still slowing down. Is the reform program working? Is your reform program working?
It is working. It is working. Its first objective was budgetary consolidation and to secure the situation of Italy in the financial markets. We are achieving this, and in 2013 Italy will be one of the rare EU member states to achieve a balanced budget in structural terms. It's only natural that when you push budgetary consolidation that far, and when in the meantime you introduce a number of deep structural reforms, such as pension reform, labor market reform, many liberalizations, and a lot of thoroughgoing spending review, well, the overall result of that is certainly not expansionary for a while. On the contrary, unfortunately, it will be contractionary, and we are, I hope, in the final stages of this domestically made but necessary policy contraction, which of course goes with the international economic environment, which is not conducive to growth. But Italy will be, in the course of next year, ready to pick up, because it will have substantively restructured its own policy making and the roots of its economy, and it will have an increased productivity and competitiveness. So that's why I'm making the point that do it now if you want to invest in Italy, because prices of assets may
rise later.
Yeah.
Is it possible to say that you're done with austerity measures for now? You won't be introducing, or there's no need to introduce any further austerity measures in Italy?
That is correct.
Will the focus then be on growth if you're done with all the structural reforms? And if so, how? How are you going to promote growth going forward?
We are done with introducing measures towards austerity. We concentrate on growth, but it's not that we start concentrating on growth now, because since day one, as we introduced austerity measures, we at the same time went the route of structural reforms, and that is a policy for growth, that is removing the structural impediments to growth as suggested by the European Commission, by the IMF, by the ECB and everybody, so that we are continuing to introduce measures for growth, but we will also be seeing come out of the pipeline soon the positive effects on growth of the measures introduced since 1 year, which could not give immediate results.
But you're on the record as having said that maybe some mistakes were made. Maybe you would have liked to have paid more attention to the poorest citizens in society. Going forward, how might you try to address some of those mistakes, try and pay more attention to poorer citizens? What sort of measures might you like to introduce or perhaps
I'll
weaken
make a distinction when I say that we may well have made mistakes. I believe I say a platitude, but which is often not said by real politicians. And when I say that I would have liked to be able to assist the poor more, that is, I mean, not having done that, unfortunately, was not a mistake, was simply a lack of resources. We, nevertheless, did modify previous policies in the sense of a more equitable policy, for example, by being much more tough than was the case in the past against tax evasion, and by introducing some taxation of assets, for example, on first houses, which exist in virtually all OECD member states, but which had been recently taken away with a policy mistake, I believe, in Italy.
Can you say that Italy is now safely beyond the point where it would need to seek either a sovereign bailout or any form of international financial assistance?
I believe this is definitely the case. In the Eurozone, of course, we are all linked to each other, so we will never be, I mean, not even the most powerful and financially solid countries will ever be totally sure that nothing will happen. But yes, concerning the, in particular, the mechanisms devised recently in the EU to stabilize interest rates in the sovereign bond markets, about that instrument, we are happy on both accounts. One, Italy has been probably the main instigator of the introduction of this instrument, finally agreed unanimously by the EU. And secondly, we may well not need to use it.
Well, on that point, what do you say to some analysts who say that Italy probably will at some point have to access the ECB's bond buying program under the outright monetary transaction program? Are they wrong?
Time will tell.
But what do you think?
As I just said, I think that Italy will not need to do so, but we are in a safe place because that instrument does now exist. It would not have existed without Italy's persuasion on our colleagues, the other member states. But given the huge progress achieved in stabilizing our budgetary policy, I don't see in the foreseeable future a need to do that.
As you address investors, whether it's in the Middle East or beyond, what do you say to them when they ask the question of what guarantee do we have that Prime Minister Monti's reform program will continue after elections in March next year?
I would say two things. One, what guarantee did investors have about any specific desired outcome of the US presidential elections? Or even more, what guarantee would investors in China have about the transition process decided by the Chinese Communist Party, and so on. So Italy does have many specificities, but having elections from time to time is not an Italian specificity. So my answer would be, please relax. Having said that, there is no doubt in my view that in the recent past, particularly, but not only in the last 12 months, the Italian society and also the Italian political system have gone through an important change. We may, as a government, have facilitated the understanding that something had changed. For example, you know that usually unpopular measures are hardly stomached by
That's true.
by people, by society.
No one likes austerity.
No one likes austerity, but so far we haven't seen major manifestations of backlash against that, like in other Eurozone countries.
So you think that's the indicator, if not the guarantee, that your program, you're confident your program will continue, whoever comes to power after the elections?
Yes, in the important aspects, yes, because the political parties in general do agree that a continuation of serious policies is needed, and they have discovered in the process that will not necessarily bring them poor electoral results, because people are mature, are more adult than politicians often believe them to do.
I think many would agree with you when it comes to that point, sir. Is Europe moving fast enough for your liking on things like banking and fiscal union? Or are you worried at the speed?
The speed of Europe is necessarily slow. There are 27 guys around the table, or 17 around the Eurozone table. As to the banking and fiscal union, I am worried if there are delays. That's why we and other member states fought hard in the last European Council and will continue to do so against temptations entertained by some very large member states to postpone the date.
Perhaps like Germany?
It did not occur to me, but you may be right, yes.
Do you think that we will have an agreement on a banking supervisor by the end of the year, as was originally envisaged, or are we now off that target?
No, we will.
We will.
I would consider it disappointing if we didn't. Which does not mean that on January 1st the system will be up and running.
But at least we'll have an agreement in principle or in writing. Maybe then you have some ideas of how to resolve then, sir, this question which seems to be dogging the talks, how to include the participation of non-Euro members in banking supervision on an equal footing with Euro members. What are your thoughts on that?
Not very easy, also because within the category of the non-Euro member states, there are some no Euro member states and some not now but as soon as possible Euro member states. So different objective and psychological variants of not being there already. I think that a solution will have to be found. Obviously, things are not made easier by the fact that so much of the EU's financial activities take place in the City of London, which does not exactly appear close to the moment when it might become a member
of the Eurozone.
But on the other hand, it is a great interest of the UK to remain as much as possible on board as regards the single market in general and the single market for financial services specifically. At any rate, my position, Italy's position, has always been the position of building bridges as much as possible between the euro ins and the euro out.
If there is a delay in sorting out this issue of banking supervision and banking union, that will also delay the supposed next step, which is direct recapitalization of banks in the Eurozone by the European Stability Mechanism. Would that have a negative impact on Spain, on perhaps even indirectly on countries like Italy?
I take note, although I do not share your heroic effort to bring Italy in a prominent role in the picture concerning this topic, but certainly should there be a postponement of the direct banking recapitalization, a decision, by the way, which was taken by the heads of governments already back in June, that would be damaging as a whole and damaging at least for Spain. This brings me to look with even increased emphasis at the need to achieve an agreement by the end of this year.
What do you make of suggestions by some countries, like Germany, who reportedly would like to see the ECB play a supervisory role, but not on all banks, perhaps just the top banks? Would that undermine the ECB's supervisory capability?
I think it would be a mistake. I think the ECB should have supervisory powers over each and every bank in Europe, although it may exercise that power through a network-based management system, of which there is a well-functioning system in Europe already for the network of the competition or antitrust agencies centered upon the Commission, but involving all the national competition authorities. Something similar is in the process of being devised for the banking supervision, and it would be a pity, objectively, to exclude banks of, let's say, below a certain size, also because we have seen that most cases of banking crisis in Europe recently have indeed concerned those apparently innocuous banks. And also it would be a mistake considering specifically Germany, because as we know well, the system of, in particular, the regional and local banks, the Landesbanken and the Sparkassen, so the regional banks and the savings banks, particularly for the regional banks, is not the brightest part of Germany's or of Europe's banking system. So it would be slightly irresponsible to leave that out of a tight, coordinated supervision.
And related to that point then, so how do you feel about suggestions that the ECM powers of recapitalizations should be limited to future recapitalizations and not deal with any retroactive problems? Would that limit the effectiveness of the ESM's recapitalization powers?
Probably yes. This is not a trivial issue, one has to admit. I don't have right now at hand a solution to submit to you, for which I apologize.
No problem, sir. What would you say in general? There is a sentiment, it may not be accurate, but what would you say to those in the northern part of Europe who say, why should German taxpayers or Northern European taxpayers consistently underwrite and bail out problems in the south? What would you say to that sentiment, sir?
To that sentiment, I would say let's build sentiments on realities, first of all, and not on supposed realities. So definitely in some cases there has been bailing out, but that does not really correspond to a dividing line between North and South. Take the case of my country, Italy. Many Central and Northern Europeans may perceive that Italy is, because of its sunshine, because of its lifestyle, a debtor country. Italy is not a debtor country. Italy does not owe a single euro to any rescue or restructuring fund of the European Union. On the other hand, Italy is a very Nordic country by that token, because we are the third largest contributor not only to the EU budget as a whole, but specifically the third largest contributor to the pledges and disbursements for Greece. Actually, are we the third one, or maybe aren't we the first one? Because in the case of Germany and France, they got a lot of flowback of benefits, because by rescuing Greece, of course, they put in a safer place their banks, German and French banks, highly exposed vis-à-vis Greece, which was not the case for our banks. So on a net basis, we are almost a Arctic, very northern country, if we were to judge virtues on the base of latitude.
All right, so if we could move to politics a little bit. What is Italy?
This was not just geometry.
that was highly political. Where there is money, there is politics too.
Yes.
Let's say another type of politics then. Will Italy recognize the Syrian National Coalition as the legitimate representative of the Syrian people?
Well, we welcome very much the recent decisions in Doha, and I think it's an important step to for the international community to recognize that as legitimate.
So you're supportive of that? You would like to see Italy, or you plan to recognize them? Can I surmise from what you're saying?
We are recognizing them as legitimate representative of the Syrian people.
Would you then support finding a way for Europe to give them arms?
That is not a straightforward implication of the recognition aspect. That, of course, needs to take into consideration many other factors as well. At any rate, Italy's support for an inclusive coalition of the Syrian opposition, and we recognize the coalition as legitimate representative of the Syrian people. All this is an essential step in order to reach out to the entire spectrum of the Syrian society, and the hope that the national coalition will achieve this objective over the coming weeks. And so we are and will continue to be behind all international efforts.
But even though so may not be a natural result of your recognition, is it something you are thinking about? Is it something that Italy supports, perhaps the French effort or French suggestion that Europe should try and find a way to send some types of weapons to the opposition?
We have a tendency to discuss these issues about convergence of policies first with our peers within the EU context, and then we come out with hopefully a unified position.
Mario Monti, the Prime Minister of Italy, thank you so much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you so much.